Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the special meeting we're having here on Tuesday, January the 18th, 2022, in regards to the water and wastewater rates setting for 2022 and 2023. And this is quite the meeting for us. It's been a very difficult process with staff and council. When we first got to look at this, it was a 22% increase, and of course, a lot of that comes from the amount of money we need to spend on infrastructure, which is a significant amount of money that we need to spend on infrastructure when it comes to water and wastewater, and the costs that have gone up. And you know that just by going to your own hardware store and seeing some of the prices, or the grocery store and seeing the prices of houses. And it's trickled down, of course, into the municipality as well, and things that we have to pay for. And the water tower was certainly a lot more expensive than we thought it was going to be. And here we are building it, and of course now we have to pay for it, and as well as the other infrastructure that is coming up. So it's been a very tough go. The initial amount of increase being 21%. Of course, that is troubling for everyone here on council, and I know for the people of the community as well. And so we've asked staff to go back and look at this again. And that's what they have done. So I'm going to ask council right now, any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. And we don't have any delegations that have come on today that have asked to speak. And we'll get right to the reports from staff. We do have the recommendation here that Township of Mapleton Council receive Finance Report FIN 2022-01 for information, and direct staff to amend the Fees and Charges Bylaw 2022-01 Schedule K based on the option we choose for setting the water and wastewater rates for 2022 and 2023, effective February 1st, 2022. So now that I read that, I need to move in or seconder that afterwards. We're not going to do that right now because we don't know what option we're going to choose, but I just wanted to read that up front to get started. And I will turn everything over now to our Finance Director, Mr. John Morrison. John?
Good morning, Council. I think you're going to have to share the screen so you can see the presentation. Is my presentation seen right now? Can you see the
it's up, sir. Show? It is up.
Okay. And you just see the one page now, because that's all I see. I don't see you either.
Yeah, we see the water tower, water and wastewater rates, as well as the sidebar with the different pages.
Okay. So I guess I'll begin the presentation for the waste and wastewater rates. So whether we're talking about water rates or the tax rates, we really are designing to identify our priorities, determine what our costs and revenues are going to be, allocate, we basically are trying to collect the cash. We're not trying to create a profit. We're not trying to make it excessive. We're trying to create enough revenue, enough cash, so we can meet our obligations. And then we have to think about, well, how are we going to raise that money? And the taxes, it's well defined for us. And in the water and wastewater rates, council has chosen a financial model from the past in which it felt it had some sort of equity in how to raise the rates. So though that process brought us, just a second. To the, the declining block rate structure. Now, with this rate structure, the intent was to provide financial sustainability and allow ratepayers to, in essence, determine the amount of money that they would spend on the on their water and wastewater charges because they had control over some of the technologies they would put into their house in order to conserve water. And in Southern Ontario, we often don't think about it, but conserving water is will becoming a key or core priority as we go through the next few decades with population growth. So it wasn't a bad idea to put in the declining block rate. However, it does present to us a financial vulnerability that we probably didn't understand when we brought this declining block rate structure into being. So the components historically has been a fixed charge for recovering administrative costs like billing, collecting, metering, and the variable or volumetric rates was designed to capture operating and capital. So here was the issue. In our effort to promote sustainability, we began to recognize we had a significant vulnerability. You know, the base of being only 948 customers meant that the behavior pattern of a very small group could influence our ability to collect enough cash or revenue to actually build the infrastructure that we require. And that's a big problem. So in 2020, we made the decision to finance the debt charges and reserves as part of the base charge, and in essence, collect it equally from all the ratepayers throughout the utility. The declining block rates would still be in effect. They still could moderate some of the impact that the rates would have, but for the most part, we were designed to collect our capital requirements and the cost of carrying those capital requirements as we move forward in time. So on this screen here, I actually showed you the top part of the screen here is basically our budget. So these are our transfers to reserve: 348, 435, 455. Here's our debt charges: 189, 188, 503. Here was the administration costs. I think that's about 20,000 a month. So, and it's more or less going up lower than the rate of inflation now. And the variable rates were basically their operating costs from Aqua to pay for, you know, the fixed fees. We're going to have to pay this no matter what. We can't even influence it because it's under contractual obligations. And again, we've been moving that up in a steady inflationary pattern. But again, we could be subject to renegotiation of those contracts. So the revenues that we set up are designed to capture these budgeted costs. And I think what's very interesting about this entire diagram is debt charges. Almost $315,000, 167% of the increase is on this one line called debt charges. You're not seeing it in the transfers. It was only modest. You're not seeing it in our administration for the billing. You're not seeing it even from Aqua, who has been running the operations. It is entirely the debt charges that is driving this. And that's why we're kind of in a difficult position in terms of collecting or needing to collect the money. And if I'm going too fast or people want to ask a question, please just jump in and I will stop the presentation there. So this busy screen is sort of what I'm trying to do is flow everything as if it went through our reserves. This is not how we actually do the accounting, but it gives non-accountants a little bit of how the flow of the money supports the capital expenditures. So at the top, that was our cash on hand. The auditors agreed it was $2.8 million. And then last year we transferred from the water 271, we transferred 166, and we raised $188,000 in debt charges. Well, now, so we have 3.4 million. We decided to reduce, well, we had to pay the debt charges, so that's basically in and out. We then decided we're going to spend $7.9 million, most of that being driven by the water tower. We recovered $2 million from the development community. We issued a debenture of $2.9 million from Ontario Infrastructure. We got more grant money from the Ontario government for $399,000, and we got gas tax funding of $667,000. So the reserve would only spend 1.9 because we got these other sources of funding. We would end up with a balance of 1.3 million. We might earn interest through that year from the money sitting in the account of about $12,000. Our balance on hand, and away we go. And we flow it through the years, going up and down. As you can see, we're healthy, we've got cash. Oh, we're pretty low. We're going to be in trouble these couple of years, another trouble, a couple of years troubling. And then we should have a more healthy reserve. Again, we have another transfer from the capital reserves. And this is a transfer of capital reserves. So we originally were going to put in $2.5 million. $2.5 million has a lot to do with why the debt charges was $528,000, because there's a real dollar cost of carrying that amount. So that's busy. And I decided to show this screen in a few different ways. So the next screen is now in the report. We mentioned in option 2 that just last week, SEMA Plus had talked to our CEO and Director of Public Works and decided that, well, the project for $500,000 for sludge removal is probably only going to cost $100,000, and therefore we could save $400,000. So since we were raising the money, it's in here. I took it out and we flow it through. And now I'm saying, well, we don't need $2.5 million. That now needs only $503,000 in debt charges. If I go back a page, oh, it was $528,000. So, you know, we found 400,000. We reduced the amount of debt we have to collect, but it's really not impacting the rates a lot. So it's going down from what, $25 to $23. So that's what that 400,000 is doing if we continue with this plan. So the thought, here's the same screen again. Everything is the same, except the transfer for $2.1 million isn't there. And we're okay up until 2023. Because if we don't find some money in 2023, we will have no money to spend in a capital program at all. So since this is this loan from the transfer from the capital reserve to this environmental reserve isn't completely under the control of the council, we don't have to do it in 2022. We could do it in 2023, and away we go. Or we could find another source of grant money from somebody and therefore finance it without having to further impact the rates. So a choice that can be made of deferring this $2.1 million for at least a year before we would have financial problems. So again, I kind of just giving you an overview of the original plan. I mean, the existing ratepayers in the next 10 years are going to pay $6.8 million. That's 24% of the total capital program. The debt charges, assuming they do take on the capital reserve, is going to be about $6 million or 21 in that 10-year period. The DCs are going to be $4 million. We expect direct grants in that period about $4 million. And the deferred funding is literally the debt being stretched into the next 10 years, over 25 and 30 years to fund the $28 million. Again, I'm just repeating the plan that we indicated. Now I introduce this slide because there is a conflict between the stability, and the stability is building a rates so that we can build our infrastructure program. The stability is about not seeing huge increases like we did this year, so that we can have some financial flexibility. And the vulnerability currently is how small our base is. So I introduced this slide because when we went up to 700 cubic meters for our water capacity rating, it was estimated that we could build about 207 new units. Now, all those units haven't been built, but if all those units had been built as of today, and we were facing the same financial crisis or pressures as we did today, the base rate would not be $51, it would be $43. That means that the monthly impact would be $7.64. It would be a $97 increase, 25 cents a day, a 6% increase. So what I'm trying to say to you is that when you look at the master plan, it's not just about cost avoidance. It's whether you can afford not to build something as well, because this would make a lot of pressure off and allow us to continue to make the necessary upgrades for the stability of the system. This is creating the flexibility that our base currently has a vulnerability being too small. So what you're being presented today is, do we just go with the 400,000 reduction on the need for, instead of $2.5 million reserve from capital reserve, $2.1 million, and then build those in today's rates? And that would see the average residential homeowner, sorry, I went too fast, paying only $23. That's a 20%, not the 22% that we originally forecasted, because we found $400,000. Or do we decide that, why don't we wait that year, not make this $2.1 million until the beginning of 2023, and then build the rates into it if we need it? And what you'll be seeing today is for the average residential homeowner would be a $12 monthly increase in the fees, $145 over the year, a 10.53%. And what's causing that? Well, it's this carrying cost. I just avoided $131,000 in carrying costs. I don't need that cash until 2023. So I would, at this point, prepare to take questions if anyone has any questions, because I believe that, your choice here is to build immediately some flexibility in your rates by raising them now or waiting the year to see what happens. You'll have more information with respect to the, the master plan, what you actually need, better engineering costs. The engineering costs are just as important as to affordability, a better financial plan, in terms of those costs being better developed. You might be able to find other grant money because in 2023, I believe we're talking about a force main and pumping station that's required to help with the next rating increase. That would be over $3.5 million. Maybe some funding could come from that, and therefore we might not even need the transfer of $2.1 million. There's a lot of things that I'm not sure about what will happen in the future, but I mean, the choice is that it probably is going to get a little bit tighter. So, the water master plan isn't really going to save you much money because the asset management planning is fundamentally changed the game. Historically, the game has always been that tell us what the engineer says is going to cost. Tell us what the construction is going to cost. Well, and dump 5% on top of it, that's the cost. And let's move on to the next year. Now, what they want you to do is think, well, that asset's going to last 25 years and maybe you're going to do some major work in 10 years from now. And tell us estimate what that cost is going to be. And then go back to finance and do your fancy discounting and figure out how much money you need to save every month and every year to have that money raised so that you're not trying to raise the taxes like we are at the last moment. So it is a complicated process that is going to put more financial pressure. We have to decide how we're going to introduce that to both the ratepayers and the taxpayers. So you're seeing some interesting conflicts between sustainability, vulnerability, and trying to create flexibility in your rates. So any other questions? Because I think I finished with the presentation.
All right, John, thank you very much for your presentation and all your information. We do value your insight into this, and I know you've been working really hard, and we do appreciate that. So thank you very much. As I said, this is a tough file, and it's only because of the increase that we're seeing of 22% that's causing this to be even much tougher than normal. We've, as council, we think this is probably the fourth, maybe the fifth time we have seen this. We've deferred it or postponed it on 2 occasions, and we need to make the tough decisions. So we're going to open it up to questions for John from council members. Councillor Douglas.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to John, just a point of clarification. So if we do option 2, which is the deferral option, and nothing else changes in the plan, or there's no new sources of funding or grants, are we looking at reevaluating the rates again in 2023 to make up for this deferral, or what are we thinking?
Through you, your worship, in all likelihood, yes, you would have to, once we make a commitment and we're going to use the taxpayers' money, the ratepayer is on the hook to start paying that back over the next 25 years. And there will be a cost of carrying that cost. So you would have to increase the rates so that it would reflect the 20% increase that is in option 1. So you're making a decision and buying yourself a little bit of time to figure out, are there other funding sources? What's the master plan going to say? How expensive is it? What do we really need to raise as we're moving forward? Because this is getting, I imagine to the ratepayers, is getting kind of annoying. So it's something you need to think about.
So just to follow up with that, John, and it's a good question. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. So we do 10% this year and we find no other sources of funding. We need to find that 12%. Well, we need to probably 12% or more would be what would we be asking for in 2023.
I believe that would be correct.
Councillor Craven?
John, would it be reasonable to suggest that instead of a 20 or 22% increase, instead of a 10%, could we go in the middle at 15%? Would that make it any better at all? I wonder.
Mr. Morrison?
That's up to council. That I'm just giving you the the maximum that could be raised if we want to assume that we're going to take the $2.1 million and how much that costs. I'm saying the minimum is by a deferral. If you want to go up anywhere in between, I can figure out the math.
Thank you. Good question, Councillor Craven. Do you have a follow-up?
No, not yet.
All right, thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Douglas again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just building on my last question. So the recommendation is worded that we're setting the water and wastewater rates for 2022 and 2023. So that's not necessarily the case if we go with option 2 as previously discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Go ahead, Mr. Morrison.
Through you, your worship, Councillor Douglas is correct. You really are just setting the rates for 2022. And in 2023, I'm suggesting that the rates should be what option A is, but that can be revisited before it's passed.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas, for pointing that out. And I've stroked out and 2023 on that recommendation. So we're just setting the rates for 2022. This is part of the whole process. Councillor Martin? Nothing? Okay. Councillor Ottens? Yeah, this is a very tough one, everyone. And Councillor Craven brings up a good point of, do you want to go more than 10? Do we want to stick with the 22, go down to 10? This is a lot of options. So council really has a lot to discuss here. Councillor Craven?
I've heard from a few ratepayers, especially down in Moorfield here, that are absolutely not happy with 22, and I don't know who would be. And this is one thing I'm wondering if we could appease them a little bit by going to a 15 instead of a 20 or 10. I realize that we probably should go with a 20 and bite the bullet and do it, but I'm not sure the ratepayers are ready for that. It's been a tough year for people with this COVID thing too, and I think maybe we kind of should give them as much of a break as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Craven. Just like we, when we did our taxes for the entire community, we looked at the hardships that are out in the community. And certainly the hardships are in our water, wastewater base areas, which are Moorfield and Drayton. And I can certainly understand, I don't think there's any council member on here wishing to have a 22% increase. I know in my house, Mary Ann's not too happy about it. So that's why we're here to discuss this, we're here to talk about it for the ratepayers. We are their representatives. Councillor Ottens.
Yes, thank you. Through you. I'm just looking at the discussion part of the report. And it says that in option 2, so it's a 10%, 10.5% increase. That comes to a monthly increase to the average household of $12 a month. So that's what, 50 cents a day, 60 cents a day. Is that how I'm reading it correctly?
Council. Mr. Morrison.
Well, I came up with 40 cents a day, but the
40
councillor
cents a
is
day?
right. Yeah, you're reading it correctly. It's about 40 cents a day.
40 cents a day.
Yeah.
When you break it down like that, does that sound so terrible? I guess it's easy for me to say when I'm the only one on council here who doesn't have to pay that, but 40 cents a day for fresh, clean water. I don't know, sometimes I think we underestimate the value of water, and that we really have to remember that it's probably one of the most important things that we're putting our money towards.
Thank you, Councillor Ottens. good thoughts. And just a note for everyone that you know, we're setting these rates for Drayton and Moorfield, and the water and wastewater system we have is for both areas. And we do have significant amount of work to be done in both areas. And I know that, you know, the water tower is a significant undertaking that we've done. And as Mr. Morrison pointed out, you know, $7.9 million. But we also know that in Moorfield, they have about $4 or $5 million worth of projects that need to be done. We're just waiting for that water and wastewater master plan to be completed, so we know exactly what we're looking at. But I can certainly look at, you know, we are one system, and we have to be one system, because there's no way that 100 users in Moorfield could pay for $5 million. That's for sure. So it's a good thing we actually moved it to a one system, and everybody's paying the same rates, which before this term started, Moorfield paid different rates than Drayton paid. So we changed that to make sure it's equitable right across the system, to make sure we're collecting enough money. But obviously, you know, we thought we were doing well until COVID hit, and well, we all know the numbers are showing differently when it comes to what we're paying for. Other questions and comments? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for Director Morrison. So the development charges that were input for 2021, I think, was it $2 million? Is that everything that was in the development charge reserve, or is that all that the growth related allocation would come up with for that?
Based on the background study, a DC study, that was pretty well what you can get out of the DC is $2 million for the water tower. We'd have to reopen the bylaws, redo the studies, and maybe once the master plan is completed, that can be revisited in terms of how much money the development community should be contributing. This year, we're indexing the rates, and I think there was a very significant rate increase anyways because of indexing, collecting it directly from the developers. But, you know, the formulas in the study kind of limits how much you can actually have the development community pay, because it's all by these complex formulas based on assumptions of cost. And even though those costs now have no longer valid assumptions.
Thank you. Follow up, Councilor Martin?
No, it just, not really. It feels kind of low. The community's been doing without until this point, and 25-30% of it is just being paid for by growth, right? So it kind of jumped out at me. I don't know if that input number maybe didn't reflect the price increase, or if that's all included. I'm not sure.
I think that when the DC study was done, it did not reflect the cost that it actually came into. That's why it's too low. And if we want to increase our costs, particularly with some of the studies going on and other projects moving ahead, you might suggest to staff to reopen that study and redo the bylaw.
And thank you, Mr. Morrison. I think that's a good idea to, and I know that Mr. Barron and I have talked about reopening the DC charges, because it is important. I know that other areas are doing the exact same thing with the price increases that are going on out there in the community. And when those charges were put in place, we didn't have the high costs that we're seeing now. That's for sure. Mr. Barron, do you want to weigh in on that?
It's actually, I was literally going to ask to speak when Councilor Martin brought it up. And part of my discussion was going to be that perhaps we should consider the 10% versus the 20%. and have an opportunity to match the master plan with the development charges and increase the development charges so that they match what our actual growth is. But Councillor Martin beat me to it. So it's a very good point, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So that's an option for council. We can ask staff to reopen that for us at another particular time. Any further questions for Mr. Morrison from his presentation, or for discussion, which direction we need to go as council when it comes to our rates? Not seeing anything. Now, Mr. Craven, Councillor Craven, you had pointed out that you might be interested in seeing a number of 15% or somewhere around there. Did you want to make a motion to that, sir, or do you want to leave it with the items that Mr. Morrison's put on the table?
Yes, I could. If you could have, maybe John could bring it back to the next meeting, what that would look like at a 15% increase. Maybe we should, I hate defer sometimes, like I said to John this afternoon, the word defer is sometimes a 4-letter word. Maybe we should defer it to the next meeting, see what it actually looks like. And as long as we're going to delve into the development charges, then I would be willing to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Craven. That's, I know personally, I'm not looking at postponing this any further. We need to make a decision. It needs to be put in place by council. And I'm not going to put Mr. Morrison on the, on the spot and say what's 15% going to be, because I don't want him to do that. But we know that it's somewhere between 20 and 10. So if you want to put that on the floor, sir, we could get it seconded and have a discussion about it. But if you want to leave it, then we'll go on with what the options Mr. Morrison put out.
Let's go on with the motions that John has.
Thank you. Thank you. So council, we have to decide between what options or something new that you might have, and option 1 or option 2 for 2022. Any suggestions? Councilor Douglas.
Not so much a suggestion, but I might be going slightly sideways on this right now. But just when considering these rates, we had an email from a resident suggesting maybe looking at some alternative payment methods and monthly billing instead of bi-monthly billing, just to help keep the bills lower. So I just wonder if we can take that under consideration down the road with whichever option we decide on.
Sorry, everyone, I just got taken off there for a minute. Didn't fully hear. I know you had that email. Did someone answer that for you while I was gone? Or were you waiting for me to get back?
We were waiting for you to get back.
All right. So, Mr. Morrison?
It's quite possible to change the billing structure. It would cost more money, but it's quite possible that we could do a monthly billing instead of a bi-monthly billing. Currently, we already have a pre-authorized debit withdrawals from people's account on a monthly basis so they can do their budgeting. So we could also do that by billing Moorfield 1 month and then Drayton the next month, and we could do it monthly. It could be done monthly if so directed. But it would mean that we'd have to do more reads. There'd be more effort on the part of staff to get the information, and I would think your administration costs would slightly increase.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I know Councilor Douglas, that email, and I understand the reasoning behind it. but I certainly don't want to add cost myself when we're trying to figure out how to pay for what we have now. You want to follow up with that?
No, I'm just wondering if, we can discuss that in another meeting and just keep this on our radar. I just wanted to bring it up.
Sure. Mr. Morrison can come back with some better numbers of how much more that would cost. Would that be suffice? Yep. Okay. Mr. Morrison, if you can bring that back at a future meeting, please, to see what it would cost to bill monthly and different options.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Any other council member wishing to make a comment or suggestion? So council, I'm not seeing anything that's coming forward right now. We do have option number 1, Councilor
Sorry.
Ottens.
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. I just wanted to throw my thoughts out there was, I'm inclined probably to go with option 2 with the hopes that there would be funding to make up the difference, grant funding possibly coming in next year. There is a provincial election in June, and often money starts flowing at that point. So maybe there'll be some grant opportunities, some stimulus funding, get the economy rolling again post-COVID. So I'm hoping that there might be some grants we can tap into. It's an optimistic thought.
Thank you. So Councilor Ottens is leaning towards option number 2. Do I have someone that would second that? Councilor Craven leaning for option number 2. So I'm going to read this again, Council, the resolution here, unless there's further discussion. That Township of Mapleton Council received Finance Report FIN 2022-01 for information and direct staff to amend the Fees and Charges Bylaw 2022-01 Schedule K based on option number 2 for setting the water and wastewater rates for 2022 effective February 1st, 2022. Further discussions before I call the vote. So all those in, Councilor Martin.
Do we have a recorded vote, please?
We can have a recorded vote. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Clerk Wheeler for the recorded vote then.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
You go ahead, sir. Oh, wait, hang on one minute, sir. I need a mover and a seconder first, please. Moved by Councilor Otten, second by Councilor Craven. All right, go ahead, sir.
Councilor Craven,
Yay.
Councilor Douglas,
Yay.
Councilor Ottens,
Yay.
Councilor Martin,
Yay.
Mayor Davidson.
And that's a yes for me as well. So it's unanimous. Option number 2. Thank you. And like I said, it's been a tough go, council, and I appreciate the discussions we've had over the last well, since November about this, and I know how hard it's been for all of us. Moving on to the agenda, notice of provision is there, and then we'll just move on to the confirmatory bylaw. That bylaw number 2022-006 being a bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of the council of the corporation of the Township of Mapleton be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Moved by Councilor Douglas, second by Councilor Martin. Anybody opposed? Then that is carried. Thank you. And that leads us to adjournment. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this special meeting and for having this discussion. Have yourself a great night.